Across parts of South Africa, tensions linked to xenophobia are once again surfacing. For many African migrants, daily life is becoming increasingly uncertain. Reports of harassment and attacks are raising concerns not just about safety, but about identity and belonging. This is not happening in isolation. Economic strain, unemployment, and political rhetoric are shaping public sentiment. In that environment, migrants often become easy targets, blamed for pressure that are far more complex.
The implications extend beyond South Africa. They touch on regional cooperation and economic integration, and the idea of a shared African space. So, to help us understand this, we're joined by a host of guests here. First off, let's introduce Convince Mlongo, South African activist. He joins us. And also Daga Tola, General Secretary of the Movement for a Socialist Alternative. Also joining us via Zoom is Lerato Ngobeli. She's acting as a national spokesperson. And here in the studio, our very own in-house South African, Inham Maso. Inham, thank you for joining us here today. I would like to first of all get everybody's take on the instances and the issue that we're seeing from South Africa. First off, let me start by saying that yesterday we had a monologue dedicated to the xenophobic attack that we are seeing on video here in Nigeria. And we got a lot of response, mostly from South Africa. And we'll be reading some of those as we go on the show today. But first off, let me talk to you, Convince. What's your take on the situation that we're seeing coming out of South Africa regarding migrants?
Thank you very much, host and your co-host in this space. I think it's aprophobic, basically. It's not xenophobia. I think we're giving it a wrong term because it's not directed to all illegal immigrants in South Africa, but it's only specifically directed to Black Africans that are in South Africa. And it cannot be tolerated. I don't support this thing, and I'm scared that this thing will tarnish our relationships with other African countries. And as South Africa, our economy depends in African countries. We've got most of our companies that are working in other African countries, and we're beneficiaries, we're the most beneficiaries in other African countries than other African countries are benefiting in South Africa. So this will have a wrong impact on our economy, and I don't think it's a good thing for our country. So as we continue to talk and all those kind of things, I hope and believe that African people, they see that not all South Africans are xenophobic, not all South Africans represent whatever or are represented by this tiny group of people. South Africa has over 66 million people. And out of that 66 million people, I can confirm here, less than 100,000 people are supporting this nonsense. And it cannot be tolerated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Convince. Lerato, would you please tell us where you stand on this issue?
I think that, firstly, we must appreciate the fact that this is a very complex issue. It is not one-sided at all. And I think to give it a particular name is also quite problematic. If my colleague who has said that there's a very small or tiny minority of people in South Africa who are xenophobic or Afrophobic, I think that that is what we must lead with, because if South Africans were xenophobic or Afrophobic, we would have not had migrants come into South Africa at all, irrespective of where they come from, whether they come from Europe or anywhere around the globe. We would not have had those people being here. So I think that we must locate the conversation around that. The reality is this way. The reality is that there are economic pressures in South Africa. He speaks about 66 million South Africans who are noted as the composition of the population. But what you also must realize is that we've got 23 million of those who are unemployed, who are not gainfully engaged in society. And many of them, in fact, a very large group of them, over 60% of them, are young people who have absolutely no hope for the future, who are absolutely disengaged in both the political process, the economic process, and the social processes in terms of civic movements in our country. A lot of them, if you drive around the streets of townships like Alexandra and Soweto and everywhere, a lot of them have resorted to being on drugs and smoking hookahs and really have got the faces of hopelessness. And so for us to not appreciate the circumstances under which they find themselves, I think that it's a very narrow focus into this particular issue. And so for us is to shine a spotlight and to say that ultimately government inaction causes the precipitation of tensions that we have seen, not just this year. We have seen that, I think, from the early 2000s when the global meltdown was happening. These things started to happen, and so this is a complex issue. It should no one should be vilified. Absolutely, it is the state that must be vilified. We've tried to locate it and contextualize it that way, but unfortunately, our state is lethargic and has been very, very dismal in managing this crisis. And I think in this conversation, we must try and locate the conversation in that manner. But to label either side as Afrophobic or xenophobic, while South Africans who have experienced their children being abducted, for example, we've got a case right now in Vosloorus. What do they call that? What do they call their children who are subjected to some of the violence that has been meted on them by foreign nationals who are in the country, and a very large of them being illegal foreign nationals at that.
Loreto, can you clarify, you said abduction, were they abducted by Nigerians or other people from other African countries? Can you specify, please?
Yes, so there is a case currently that we are dealing with. His name is Mazwi Mpumelelo Kubeka in a place called Vosloorus in the east rand of Gauteng. This particular child was running a spaza shop or an informal trading space, and there's a huge issue with foreign nationals who have been illegal, who had to be regularized at the last year and at the end of 2024 into 2025, if I'm not incorrect. And there is a spaza shop mafia in this country that is operating, and the community are the ones who are giving information around what they have experienced and how Mazwi could have been gone missing. He's been missing now. Today is the 26th. It's been 26 days. He's been missing from the 1st of April. These things are happening. And the community is saying that there are Pakistani nationals and Somalian nationals who are implicated in this particular case. We're waiting. It's alleged as it stands right now. But those are the lived realities of communities in South Africa.
Thank you for the clarification, Lorato. I'd like to hear Dagatola. Dagatola, your position on this before we go into our in-depth conversation on it. Dagatola, by the way, is joining us via audio only. Daga, can you hear us?
I said it's clear that I share some of this sentiment, but the very first place to begin is to condemn this recurring and unending violence. And our task here today is to appropriately locate the basis, for this violence and how ultimately it can be resolved. Yes, this can come to an end, but ultimately the background is the huge betrayal of hope and expectations by majority of South Africans. 23 million people, in poverty. The unemployment figure close to 31.2% in South Africa. There is a massive, huge betrayal of the entirety of the expectations of 1994 for a majority of youngsters. Indeed, for a lot of people in Africans, the immigrants, the black Africans who came to South Africa came on the basis of this huge dream of 1994. But what has the ruling class done with this hope? What has the ANC done with this hope? We are confronted with the huge betrayal of hope. Of course, black rule has come, but what has changed in South Africa? This is the question that ordinary South Africans are unable, on the basis of their current consciousness, to address their mind to. And this is where, again, you must raise the question of the role of the trade union. What has COSATU done in all of this? COSATU has continued with his so-called tripartite agreement with ANC, when in reality, COSATU should make a break from ANC and see that ANC no longer represent the entirety of the aspirations of ordinary working class South Africans on the streets of South Africa. There is a huge anger against the growing poverty. But at this stage, this anger is currently being misdirected to another set of ordinary poor Africans, who themselves are immigrants, who themselves ran away from the massive destruction of betrayals of their own states into South Africa, expecting that they will use their sweat and labor, and of course contribute to the growth of South Africa. So for us, it is economic, it is political, and of course it is social. But ultimately, it is the refusal It is the failure of the ruling class in South Africa, currently represented by the Ramaphosa regime.
Thank you, Daga. Daga, just a second. I just wanted to mention that Daga is actually Nigerian, and I think he's calling from Nigeria, or we're reaching him from Nigeria. Queen, sorry, you were going to go.
Yes, Loreto, I'm sure you could see your TV right now. If my producer can pull up that video they've been playing, apparently it was identified that the boy who they're beating is a South African, and they were not aware because they felt he was an immigrant. Now, would you say that this situation happening, because you stated that this is not about xenophobia, we need to focus on the government and all whatnot, would you say that there is an aggression going on and they are missing the point in terms of communicating exactly what they want to communicate, and what they're doing is not right?
No, thank you for that question. I think it would be remiss if one did not acknowledge that any form of violence is unacceptable. We come from a very violent past as South Africans, and so we absolutely condemn that. We were the first also to condemn the violence that happened when we were down marching in the Eastern Cape, and so we absolutely condemn that. I think what is important to note here is that some of the times, the backstories and the context of how things actually develop are seldom covered. Particularly when news breaks or people take videos, and sometimes people take videos at the moment when this crisis is happening. And then we really need people to understand that, because a lot of the times when there's been law enforcement, there was a time when there was a march, a peaceful march in the central of Johannesburg, and we saw foreign nationals who were being raided by the actual police of South Africa, and they were swearing and slapping the police of South Africa. And that is not an indictment on them per se, because also we have uncovered, and you have seen the latest developments in South Africa, where our police service has been hugely compromised because they have been
Lerato, we seem to be losing your network. We're going to give that a bit of time and come back to you. But we still have Convince, we still have Daga. And of course, in the studio here, we have Inam. So Inam, let's turn to you now. Yesterday, I had a monologue. It was a very interesting monologue because I thought I was being fair and balanced in my approach. But I got home to about over 100 comments. And the majority of these comments, even up until this morning when these, we have, let's see how many comments we have now. Over 300 comments, if I'm not mistaken. And the majority of these comments, wow, they picked on everything from my belt buckle to my locally acquired foreign accent. It was all vitriol. It was mostly vitriolic. I would say that 3/4 of these comments were really mean. They were attacks, let me say, not just on what I said, but also on my personality. And I'm wondering if this is a regular response to non-South Africans in South Africa by South Africans. What are we looking at here?
So it's interesting that you'll say that because I know that Lerato made some positive and truthful sentiments. And in as much as we want to shy away from the fact that are we looking at Afrophobia? Are we looking at xenophobia? Mazino, I am South African. I love my country. But when you sit down and you study patterns and you study behavior, the one thing that I think we shy away from, Queen, is the fact that we are yet to acknowledge that internally we have a problem. We have a problem. And I'll say this because you remember my first time on Jasiri. I am very South African. But the day they saw me sitting in a studio in Nigeria with Nigerian women, South Africans came at me because they did not believe that a South African could be sitting and working in Nigeria. So the first thing that they condemned was not necessarily the fact that, oh, why is she in Nigeria? The comments that were there was, oh, another Chidimma trying to be South African, and there is a problem. And unfortunately, because of what Lerato said, where she mentioned the fact that South Africa comes from a history of fight. Do you understand? It's inherent for us to retaliate in a way of defense, in a way of, fighting. I feel like to a certain degree it's inherent. But I've come to understand that there are skills that we have honed, which is the flight or fight response. And we lack the ability to communicate what we feel. So you feel like because you don't necessarily have the right words to communicate, the first thing that you know how to do is attack, insult, fight, which are some of the things that you saw in the comments with Mazino. Many people weren't necessarily listening to understand. They were listening to respond. And their response was, who are you? this is who we are. So where do you get off saying this and this and this about South Africa when an inflow of your people are in South Africa? And it's a problem.
I want to read one of those comments. One of those comments said, this was from at RRNB940, says, pretentious highbrow English aside, please note that immigration is a regulated phenomenon and a breach of the rules attracts unfavorable consequences. Well, these consequences are, I'm thinking perhaps, is the violence that we are seeing. Convince, let's talk about the violence as a tool in South Africa for the situation. Why is it violence? Why not diplomatic talk, or at least even just why resort to violence? It's coming from a very long history. Yes, I know this. But at this point where Africa is trying to bond together, why do South Africans still choose to use violence like this was 1993?
Thank you very much for the question. But firstly, let me say, Otto van Bosmek, the Chancellor of Germany, I think he should be proud in his grave that Africa is as divided as it is now. Because whatever we see now, my brother, it's as a result of the 1884-1885 Berlin Conference, where Africans were divided and they shared our territory. It was a divide and conquer situation. That's why now they taught me that a Nigerian, I must launch a xenophobic attack against them because they are foreigners and all those kind of things. And I always ask this question. I said this, Mati, if you can tell on my TikTok platform, I said that there are other ways of sorting these things. I'm not saying illegality must be promoted. I'm not supporting crime. If you come to South Africa undocumented and you are coming in a wrong way without papers, where even if you commit crime, you cannot be traced, it's wrong.
Right.
But I'm saying the method that it's used to send people is very wrong. The method is more wrong than than everything. So I'm saying, let's give it to the police to do what they are hired for. I said to South Africans, you guys are paying tax each and every day. Your tax pay the border management officials. Your tax pays the police officers in South Africa. If you see anyone who is in South Africa illegal, go to the police officers. Tell them that there is someone who is in South Africa illegal. The police officers will do what they are hired for, what you are paying them for with your tax pay, with your taxes. Then they will send those people home in a diplomatic way without violence. Because violence can never be a solution to solve our problems as African people. And one thing that frustrates the most, we are dealing with an unrepentant tribalist who was involved to be a xenophobia or to be a xenophobic attack advocate. This Jacinta Zuma, by the way, that is leading this whole thing, was also tribal against people of Limpopo in South Africa. Then you can ask yourself, what kind of person? The person tried this division and segregation. And we as Africans must promote unity and love.
Let's try and make our response summary so that we can get everybody's thoughts in.
Yes. But before we continue this conversation, I don't want you to go anywhere. We'll go on a short break. When we return, this conversation continue. Please stay with us.
But we're back to our initial conversation regarding the, well, Afrophobic attacks in South Africa. In the studio here with us, we have our Inner Master joining us. And of course, we have Lerato Ngobeli of Action SA. We also have Dagatola and of course, Convince also still online with us.
Yes.
Queen, please.
Yes, sure. This is a conversation that, of course, most times is relatable when you're from South Africa. So, Inam, I would appreciate if you help us ask the next question, because I feel like you are rooted in this conversation and you're from South Africa. So please do ask the next question.
Thank you so much, Queen. I think, Lerato, I'll come to you because, I mean, I was picking bits and pieces of what you said before you got disconnected. I'm saying this because I know that I was having a conversation the other day, and I noticed that many a times when we talk about the foundation as to why we're having this problem in South Africa, we see people gravitating towards criminality. And I'm asking this because you said in your statement about the young boy that, I don't know if he was kidnapped in a spaza or something of the likes. So I was about to speak in my language.
You're allowed.
When we look at the foundation as to why people are retaliating in this manner in South Africa, are we saying that the trajectory stems primarily from the crime that we say foreign nationals are propagating in South Africa?
No, thank you for that question. I was going to say, yeah, it would be nice to hear you speak Zulu. At the beginning of my remarks, I think I wanted to sensitize us to say we in the political class and the political spaces, as well as the media, we have a very huge responsibility in this particular topic because it has been unmanaged for so long. As I said, our government has been very lethargic with regards to this, and they've hid behind particular sections of our law and not implemented other parts of our law because the nefarious parts of our politics have been benefiting from the criminality that has occurred and that has been also under the cloud of illegal foreign nationals. So it's important that we locate the debate there and also to say that there is absolutely an appreciation that there are foreign nationals in South Africa who are here legally, who are permanent residents, who are doctors, who are adding to our society. And our society is richer because of their contribution to what we have become as a society. But I think what my other colleague who is on the line, our colleague from Nigeria, I appreciate his comments because I think to locate this from a place of Afrophobia and to vilify South Africans and not understand the pressures that they are feeling in informal settlements from whence they come. And this is where the crime comes in because in informal settlements, you can imagine, the spaces are acute, the spaces are small, resources are even more dire, and people are really struggling and fighting for scraps. And that is what is happening, as opposed to labeling it as one thing when it actually is not that. It is about the pinch that is on the existential realities and lived experience of people on the ground that we can't argue with. You can't shroud that in academic jargon and analysis, because at the end of the day, these are people's lived experiences. And unfortunately, crime becomes the most pronounced outcome of that mismanagement by the South African state.
Okay, so I would like to believe that deal a lot more with the lived experiences per se. I'd like to hear from you if you can give us a bit of an example where there was an experience where someone was at a disadvantage because a foreign national was in close proximity, whether it's Soweto, whether it's Alexander, whether it is Ekukuletu, for example. Because again, like you've said, there's that tug of war where it's like, well, our resources are limited and you being here are taking away from the resources. There was a video that was trending, Izolo, where, Queen, you showed me the video where a South African national was outside and they were taking videos and they're like, we are sleeping outside, but these guys are inside. Now, I know for a fact that in South Africa, we don't offer free living accommodation. One of the reasons why you would find that person inside a house and someone else outside the house was because someone was unable to pay rent. So I think if you can just educate us, and I'm asking these questions because, like you said, we do have people that are watching from South Africa and we have people that are watching from the rest of the world as well. So are there any instances and examples that you can give us where something like that transpired, where a South African was literally physically at a disadvantage because a foreign national was present?
There are so many. I don't even know where to begin. I'm going to begin here because this is the current reality that we are facing. One, it is very clear in South Africa that we do have a mafia that is running, a shadow state that is running, that has been proven by all of these reports that we are seeing, the Madlanga Commission, the ad hoc committee on the corruption in the police service that was uncovered by Lieutenant General Ntandam Kwanazi in July of last year. This has been something that South Africans are very clear about. Recently, we've got the SIU report that has demonstrated the complicity of certain members of South African society who have facilitated certain kinds of corruption. So firstly, in January, every year in South Africa, we have got a school access issue. Even till today, I'm still dealing with young people, children, South African children who have not been able to be placed in the education system because the education system is full and because it goes on the application forum that is electronic. And in South Africa, the law says every single child can never be denied education irrespective of whence they come. Those examples are real examples. And you've seen the outrage where South African parents have been outraged by the fact that, just because this one is foreign, but they happen to apply an hour before me, they got placement. And what is happening in South Africa, colleagues, I really, really want us to be very sensitive about this, is the fact that our government and our officials always hide behind the laws that allow for these things to happen, as opposed to demonstrating to South Africans that South Africans are being taken care of. It almost seems as if the outrage of South Africans must be muted for them to be labeled a particular thing, when all that they're fighting for is space in their own country. I think we need to be very sensitive around that, because that is what has happened. And I want to finish my comment by saying this. You know, the apartheid government never considered black South Africans, people of color in general in this country, as citizens. And as a result, like my colleague said earlier, that the failure of the governed and a ruling party and a ruling class of not ensuring that the aspirations that are in our constitution have caused a situation where South Africans are beginning to abhor their constitution and hate their constitution, to say this constitution is not speaking to us. And so the post-democratic South Africa seems to have also left ordinary South Africans behind and upheld a particular cohort of South Africans. And that is what has created the circumstances in which we find ourselves. I think it is important that we located there, that the people of South Africa feel cared for, even in the conversations that we have. And those of us in the spaces of dialogues like these need to be very responsible not to do that, because that is what fans all of this violence and all of this anger that we have seen of late.
Well, thank you very much, Lerato. Then in that case, one should think that perhaps maybe the anger should be directed at governance, not at individual migrants from other parts of the country. Speaking about crime, Dagatola, if you're still with us, I'd like you to help me out here. I'm finding it very difficult to actually research and find statistics regarding criminals inside of South Africa and how many or what percentage of those are foreign nationals. So what I have done is that I have gone to the, let's see where this is from now. This is coming from off of the Department of Correctional Services. And I'm trying to see how many people are in jails and what percentage of those people are actually foreign nationals. Let's take a look. So what it says here from a 2024 estimate is that about 18,000 foreign nationals are in South African prisons. However, the total number of people in South African prisons are 140,000. So if we take a look at this, I don't know, Daga, do you agree? Are we saying that most of the crimes being committed in South Africans are by foreign nationals? Nope. Because if you have only 18,000 out of 140,000 people, that doesn't add up now, does it?
Your statistics has already answered that question. The total number of foreigners put together in South Africa is just 5%. But I think before I continue this, I need to correct a misrepresentation, because we shouldn't sit here and have South Africa's rich legacy, history of rich legacy of struggle rewritten in that singular blanket word violence, and say that that is a takeoff, to what is currently happening. We shouldn't be here and allow such Eurocentric, or non-friendly, categorization of the word violence using a general blanket sense. As Nigerians, we are proud of this rich history of struggle. That the ANC and all of the various groups that struggle to bring an end to apartheid handed over to all of us. And it is to that rich history we must certainly return back to resolve the problem that confronts us at this material stage. And why do I say we need to return that? We need to return to that particular past. There is a need to rebirth a new mass political organization that will pose the question of liberating South Africa on a second scale, to become a South Africa for the ordinary people on the streets. We must not think that this violence, these huge misdirected reactions of ordinary people on the street, it's a cry for the growing deprivation that everybody can see in South Africa. Like I pointed out, the huge expectation. I'm in Nigeria. I should be sad to say that South Africa is gradually wearing the picture of what Nigeria is today. And yet, when 1994 came, and all of the people who trooped to South Africa, it was to go and be part of that legacy. And this is why I think it's important to say that, first and foremost, going forward, this violence should be condemned. But again, too, Ordinary people need organizations that will provide the necessary clarity of ideas so that they can direct their anger appropriately. And anger resolves nothing. Ordinary people need to get organized. The statistics you have put forward, if you look at the numbers of South Africans that can access education, that can access health facilities, that groups like Operation Dulula and March for March, are playing on. This is to be countered by organized force of the mass of the working people, and we must say here.
All right, Daga. I'm sorry, we are out of time.
Please allow me to add on to what Daga said. And again, like all of us have said, I think all of us are speaking from a place of passion because we love South Africa, whether you are South African or you are not. Like me. Like Queen. Queen knows more South African music than myself. But I think when we talk about the crime issue, we've checked the numbers. The top 3 most committed crimes in South Africa are murder, number 1, gender-based violence, and then the third is violent crime. So these are crimes associated with taxi violence, rivals, and all of those things. And when we look at the numbers, we see the statistics show that South Africans are more prevalent to committing those crimes. We're not saying that we don't have any foreign nationals that commit those crimes, but yes, we do have those crimes. But I think the one thing that should be our takeaway today is that myself and my fellow South Africans that are on the screen is that this is not South Africans don't hate foreign nationals. And I think this is something that needs to be clear, because I told Queen the other day that every time someone says, where are you from? I'm like, South Africa. The first thing that they ask me is, but why do your people hate us? We don't hate foreign nationals. And I think otherwise I'll not stop talking.